before we get into the whole like introduction and stuff and like all the things I really want to dig into, I want to ask you about your anti-dry January thing that you've currently got going on in GymBox, where everyone leaves with a 6-pack, but it's a 6-pack of beer.
Yes.
Selfishly, I want to know like what that's about.
Yeah, bar crawl.
Yeah, bar crawl.
Yeah, so the idea was that the science behind dry January means it doesn't actually work. So most people do 4 weeks not drinking and then go about binge drinking.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do the opposite and actually say, we'll make you leave with a 6-pack if you come and do the class first and complete the class. It's better to have a balance between not drinking too much and drinking some, and not going completely dry. So all of the activities in the class replicate something from a bar crawl. So beer pong, and if you miss the beer pong, you do some burpees. Pulling pints, pulling the barrel with ropes. You got the holding the plate weights for a waiter, waitress. So everything replicates it
as well.
Got the kegs as well. So yeah, it's just creating a bit of fun with it.
I love that. Where did that come from?
That came from a PR agency.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we worked with a couple of PR agencies, come up with concepts. I did. It was a really good one actually. Yeah, it's really good.
That's amazing. Sorry, I was like myself.
No, that's right.
I'm like, oh, that's right. Also, it's nice to do like icebreaker stuff, isn't it? Because then you can like ease into it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So obviously you started as a PT.
Yes.
And you're now CEO of GymBox. So talk me through like childhood to now. What has that journey been like for you? And did you always want to be in the fitness industry?
Long time ago, childhood. So I grew up on an estate in a really tight community. Older sister, parents, hardworking parents. My dad had a business. My mum worked for my dad. They effectively probably gave me my kind of work ethic and my mentality for work. Dad worked really long hours. I've always been into sport. So growing up, I was really into football, all sports really, but football was the main one. I was with a professional football club for 7 years as a kid. Got sort of released at 16.
What was that like? Because, context, ex-husband is a ex-footballer and he found that really difficult when he was 16.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good footballer though, that's the difference. No, he was a good footballer. I think looking back now that I'm older, I can put all the pieces together from sort of childhood. So I had a great childhood, really, really good. As I say, successful parents, great community that I lived in. But football was tough because being released at 16 was probably the first time I've ever had rejection from anything. So I've always done okay. So, at school, I was good at sports, and if you're good at sports at school, you kind of fit in.
Yeah, and automatically popular.
Yes, is it? Yeah, captain of the football team, lots of friends. But when you go to a football club, you're around kids that are all good. So it's very, very different. So released at 16, but I was massively into sports still. So I knew quite quickly then, so this year's my 20th year in the industry. Wow. So
congrats, that's like amazing. There's not a lot of people that can say they've been 20 years in the fitness industry. I think, I don't know what the stats are, but there's definitely statistics around people becoming or working in the industry for a couple of years and then going and doing something else because they haven't achieved their goals. Yeah,
I mean, there are obviously people been in a long time, but I kind of just stuck with it. So released at 16, they went to college. I was always, at school, I was a good pupil, decent enough grades, sort of 11 A to C's at school, but I've never been educationally motivated, let's put it that way. It's probably a nice way of putting it. So I went to college, and at 16 you have other distractions, socialising being one of them. So college was okay, did okay. I worked in a sports shop when I was 15. So my first experience of work was working in a sports shop, and I was a Saturday boy. So I worked every Saturday at 15. I worked for a guy called John Conning, who I still remember now because he set me some really, really good examples of how to run a business. Every morning on a Saturday, I swept the pavement outside, I removed the chewing gum from the pavement outside the shop, I cleaned the windows to the shop, and I redressed the front of the shop in terms of the look and feel. he was massively into customer service. He taught me things like, you shouldn't say hello in the morning to someone if you don't know them. It should be good morning. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I've stuck with it. I've always gone with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he was brilliant for me. Very strict though. I mean, if you talk about leadership, he was very, very, very strict, very old school, I'd say. But it worked for me at the time, gave me some discipline. I was always on time, I was always early. Always wanted to do a good job for him because he was quite hard to please. So that's my first experience, really. I then went to university. I didn't want to go to university. He offered me assistant manager in the shop at the time. So I was 18, assistant manager. He had 4 shops, looked after all 4 shops for him, and I was really enjoying it. And then I got probably 3 or 4 months into working there, and decided that I wanted to go to uni. I felt like I was going to miss out on something. So again, not being massively educationally motivated, uni wasn't brilliant. It was good fun, but it wasn't brilliant. But that's where I got into fitness. So I did my personal training qualifications in 99, 2000. I started doing a bit of personal training. I started coaching with football. And then after my degree, I just stuck with it, really. Got some travelling out of my system. At sort of 21, I went snowboarding, skiing for a season. Came back from that, had plans to go to do a summer season, and my idea really at that age was to just go summer season, winter season, summer season, winter season. My dad, when I got back, basically said, look, you're going to do a summer away, really? Like, do you think you should get a career now? And I think that's how it was back then. It was very much 21, 22, what's next? Let's get a career. So I chose fitness, went back to college effectively, did a sports therapy qualification, nutrition qualification, and then started my first job at 22 in the fitness industry as a personal trainer.
And now 20 years later.
Yeah, 20 years later, still here, still doing it. And I think that kind of progression through, I quite often get asked what's made that progression or how I've got to where I've got to. And I think for me, I started off as a personal trainer. Now, it doesn't matter what I've been doing. It could be at school, it could be through football. I've always taken pride in my performance. I'm very, very self-critical from that perspective. So after a football match, if I've played poorly, I'll analyse that for 3 days. So when it came to working in my first real job in fitness, I was probably successful because I was eager to please. So, I went from personal training and fitness instructor to fitness manager. I then looked after the studio product. I taught classes. I then went into the sales side of things, sales manager, deputy manager, club manager, regional manager, and then I've just worked my way through the industry effectively. So it helps as well because I can be at reception now and speak to our front of house team, and I've done their job. I can be on the gym floor and I've done their job. I can speak to a PT about generating new business, and again, I've done their job. So I think it really helps from that perspective. But I think it's just working hard and getting recognised, and every 12 to 18 months I've looked for progression and then move to the industry from that perspective.
There's not many people these days who have been, because I would describe your career as very much linear. Like you've stayed in the same industry and just leveled up, and now you're, kind of the top of your game. I'm sure there's more levels to go, no doubt. But from an outsider's perspective, that's quite unusual these days. So what do you think's kind of kept you interested and challenged? Because I think that's a bit. This is just an observation on my behalf, like disclaimer. I'm not saying this is fact, but I think a lot of people these days in the world of Amazon Prime and Uber delivery and Deliveroo and all these things want everything instantly, and so they'll spend 18 months in one job and be like, well, I've not been promoted, so I'm just going to leave. Yeah. And so you never really get that kind of consistent small actions that then build up into a great career. So from your perspective, like what's kind of kept you there? And
I think progression does. If you're recognised that you're doing a good job and there's progression there for you, then I think that helps for sure. Maybe it's just something with me. I mean, I've been with the same football club for pretty much 20 years. My previous job I was in for 7 years. I've been with GymBox now for 12 years. So I think there's a sense of probably loyalty in the roles that I work in, and enjoying it. If I enjoy it, then why change? But I think specifically around the promotions that I got, there was a path, and I could see that path. So, did I ever think I wanted to be a CEO of a fitness brand? No. wanted to own my own brand. That's what I wanted to do. And I've had other businesses. So along the way, I was with LA Fitness for 7 years. In 2009, I started a new business with a friend of mine. It's a recruitment and training business. I looked after the fitness sector, and he looked after sort of IT. I was doing a lot of consultancy for gyms, so I was going out to sort of troubleshoot gyms, and it was basically taking what I'd learned at LA Fitness across the 7 years and taking the good things probably of what I learned and not the bits I didn't like, and then going into smaller businesses and helping them with their standard operating procedures, their sales processes, their sales training. And that's how I got introduced to GymBox. So it was a bit by luck I got introduced to GymBox. I had my own business, I was working better hours, to be honest, as my own business.
It's quite unusual to run your own business and work better hours.
Yeah, it's
normally the other way around.
It's strange, isn't it? I think what it was with my previous roles, I've always worked hard, and you see a lot of podcasts and webinars and everything else about work ethic, and you see a lot about is it right to be the leader and working these long hours, and is it but I just do what I do. I'm more mindful now of what other people do, for sure. I don't expect them to be doing what I do, but I've always worked hard. So when I was with LA Fitness, I was looking after a region. So I was covering from Poole down to Brighton, up to Crawley. So it was long hours by default because I was travelling a lot and commuting a lot. When I got my own business, actually, I chose the hours. So, if I was in London for the day, great, I'm in early, but I could get away a bit early. And then, I could, when I was with LA Fitness, I was missing games of football because I was travelling and working first. When I started my own business, I made time for that. So I think it's probably why it was a bit different. But I actually put an offer in on a gym. I had an investor, one of the gyms I was consulting for, actually. And we were looking to purchase the gym. And then I got a contact from GymBox to say, look, we want some assistance with our sales processes and our sales training. Can you come on board for 3 months as a project? And actually I was trying to recruit them a sales director at the time as well. I put 3 or 4 candidates in front of them. They weren't right, and they then asked me if I could come on board, and I said absolutely no way. I'm working for myself now, I'm really enjoying it, I'm earning good money, I'm working decent hours, I'm playing football, it's a good balance. And then 3 months later I'm still there, and 12 years later I'm still there. So it gave me what I needed, and what I needed was I wanted equity in a business if I was going to go to a business, and Richard, the founder, promised me that if I came on board and delivered the results, then I'd get equity in the business, and that's what happened, to be fair. So it was a different route to what I thought I'd do, but absolutely no regrets. I mean, GymBox is great. I was a fan of the brand, which always helps as well. Not many people work from a brand they're a fan of, so that really helped. And I enjoy what I do, so I've stuck with it. There's no need to change.
I love that. You said something a minute ago when we first started talking about the start of your career, and that you worked in a fitness shop, and the boss you had was a bit of a hard ass. Obviously you didn't say that. I'm taking that from what you said, so no lawyers need to get involved. I kind of have the view that when you first start your career, you have to be micromanaged to a degree, because, and I know it's controversial because everyone wants to have freedom and autonomy and all those things. I think they're really important. Like, my team have got pretty much a decision makers throughout the whole of the business, but I do think right at the start of your career you do need kind of a stick up your butt, and you have to speak to me a certain way, and you have to do these things in a certain time, and be early and put those hours in, almost to kind of, I guess, get the basics right to then serve you throughout your career. Do you think that because the observation I had there was that role had quite a big impact on your career?
Huge.
Yeah, so what advice, I guess, or what thoughts do you have around people actually having that kind of structure and micromanagement, for lack of a better word, right at the beginning of their career?
I'd probably look at it more as learning. I think you have to learn.
Reframe.
Yeah, it's every job you do, you have to learn. Now, what John taught me, and John probably won't be listening because if he is, he's probably about 120 now. So I could say what I want about John, but I learned a lot. I learned good manners from my parents. Right, I learned to be kind and to be nice to people, and all the traits that you get from parents. Positive traits I get from parents anyway. But John taught me about customer service. He taught me about standards. I hoovered the shop when I started. I hoovered the shop when I left. So you're right. I think it's I've mentioned him before numerous times now. He gave me a really good grounding. The bit I learned from John that I didn't take into my business was was the hard ass part, because I don't think you need to be like that. You know, I don't think that. I think the old school way of management doesn't work for me. I think you can be a leader. You can have great leadership traits, honesty, empathy. You know, you can obviously have vision, of course, but I don't think you need to be that old school type of leader. And if you look back at, you know, other businesses, you can see leaders that are, you know, hard ass. You know, so I think about your Duncan Valentines. I think about your, you know, maybe your James Carnes. I think about your Alan Sugars. That doesn't work for me, and I wouldn't use that style of management. Now, I haven't worked for those guys. I'm only seeing what I see in the press, but that doesn't work for me. So I think you learn when you start a job, and I think part of that comes from a bit of micromanagement. But once you've been taught, a good leader will let someone get on and do it and learn, make mistakes, and learn by the mistakes as well.
Do you think that letting people make mistakes is an important part of not just growing your business but growing people's careers?
100%. Yeah. Look, we all make mistakes. I think if you've got a culture in your business where people are scared to make mistakes, you've got a real problem, because no one grows. So you know, I want someone to make a mistake, and one of the big things I say to my teams is to be honest. If you mess up, be honest, because we can fix it. If you try and hide it, it gets worse. So I think making mistakes, and we're talking about huge mistakes here. We're talking about, you know, of course there's HR mistakes that people can make that could be huge. And there's things that you just don't do and don't say in business. But I think the general mistakes of managing people's tough. You know, leading a team is tough. You know, can you get natural leaders? Yes. Can you learn to be a leader? Absolutely. It's a skill. You know, it's a skill. Learning how to sit down with someone and listen. You know, not to use your own examples, maybe to help them, and there's all sorts of ways that you can get it wrong, right? But I think people making mistakes is so important to growth, definitely.
We I don't know if we have a saying internally, like, but I definitely say to the team, like, unless it's life or death, like, it's not that big of a deal. We're selling personal branding services, like, no one's died, we're good, we can fix it. And I think it can be, certainly when you're at the beginning of your career, I definitely used to feel kind of that intense anxiety of like, oh my God, I fucked up here. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get reprimanded and all that kind of stuff. And it's back to your culture of, you know, if you've got a culture of you can't make mistakes, which I've definitely worked for businesses like that, you do try and hide it, because you're like, well, if I tell anyone about this, then it's going to be really bad. But actually what you're doing is making a bigger hole for yourself and a bigger problem and all those things. Which I think is really stunting of high performance, because you have to, like, I don't know about you, one of our values is win or learn, and the reason being is because if you win, that's awesome, we did a great job, but if you didn't win and it didn't go well, you can take something from it, which is a lesson, and it's often the times that you fuck up that you earn or learn the best lessons, I think. Yeah,
I agree, and I think, you know, when it comes to making mistakes, you know, we're talking about business mistakes here. You know, you're right, it's not life or death. You know, I often look at things and go, what's the worst that can happen? You know, because if you're talking about, you know, family, friends, and, you know, illnesses, and you know, that's the worst that can happen. So when I look at business, everything's fixable. Everything's fixable. So, you know, my view is, you know, if you're honest and you're willing to make mistakes. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I don't like making mistakes, right? You know, I'm a bad loser. I don't like making mistakes. But you do learn from them, and I think, you know, and also having a level of stress or level of anxiety is not a bad thing for performance, because if you're concerned about something or you've got a bit of stress about doing something, I think you'll probably improve your performance overall. And I link it back to sport quite often, because when I had big games of football, I would be nervous 2 or 3 days before, but I'm more switched on when it comes to the game, and I perform better in the game because I've got that level of anxiety or that level of stress. So I don't think a level of stress is bad for you. I think it gets you into the right frame of mind to do something. So it's to controlling, obviously, as well. It's important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think imposter syndrome is the same for me. I know they're two different ideas, but I think stress is not a bad thing. And I also think that imposter syndrome is not a bad thing, because it keeps you competitive. Like that humility that you have of like, oh my God, like, I'm not qualified to be doing this, is what keeps you from being arrogant about it or having an ego about something. Like, if I ever got to a position where I was like, oh, we know everything about personal branding, it's probably the day that my business will be done. Because, you know, someone will swoop in and do it better than us and quicker than us and all the things. You've made a couple of comments about being self-critical and, dare I say, like a bit of a people pleaser. Where do you think that's come from?
Oh God! Well, this is I could unravel years worth of.
What this podcast for? So it's like therapy.
I could unravel years of therapy now. No, I think it probably comes from rejection. Well, I know it comes from rejection because I've delved into this with a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Which I'm happy to talk about, and I think growing up and being successful and doing well, sport, and then having that rejection from a football club probably had a lasting effect on me, longer than what I would have thought. So I think, it's not like now, professional football clubs, when they release you now at 16, there's some sort of scheme that they can discuss with you. Back then, I didn't get released in person. They called my dad in, told my dad they weren't going to keep me on. And my dad came home and told me. So it was very, very different. There was no afterthought and aftercare for that. And like I say, it's the first time that I'd been rejected from something that I really, really wanted.
And quite a big rejection. If you're like a young boy, which many in this country grew up thinking, I want to be a footballer, and you get to be a footballer at whichever club and go into their academy or whatever, and then poof, 16, sorry,
yeah,
you're
absolutely.
not good enough.
Yeah, and I think back then, we're getting to obviously football and the politics of it now, but back then there was none of these stats out around, look, there's going to be a very, very small chance you're going to make it in football. Back then...
It's like 1.7%.
It's tiny, tiny. And even if you're in an academy, the amount of people now that have come out of an academy are at 16, 18 that have gone on to play non-league football, which is fine, but it's not where they thought they'd be. So I think things have improved from that perspective. But for me, that was probably a big turning point, that rejection. But again, with these things, I've always taken care about what I do. I mean, at school, I was a nightmare of handwriting. I won like handwriting awards. I literally was a perfectionist with it. I have no idea why.
Psychopath.
It's the worst award to win, I know. But as a 16-year-old boy at school, but I was such a perfectionist.
I bet that went down well with your friends.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Lucky I was good at football. But no. I don't know. I don't really know where it comes from that perspective. I know the rejection part of it has a part to play because I wanted to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Being a crowd pleaser isn't ideal. I mean, it's got to me where I've got to, and you use the right words, crowd pleaser, because I care about people's opinions, or I used to care more about people's opinions. I've learned over time, that actually, you know what? As long as I'm doing the right thing, that matters. I was talking to your team earlier on actually about some podcasts and some interviews last year during the pandemic, and I did one for Russian Times and Joe Media, and the comments afterwards, when you see the comments, I mean, I laughed them off. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have laughed them off. 10 years ago, they would have really affected me. So I think you learn that over time as well. But yeah, look, I've always wanted to do the best, no matter what I'm doing. Doesn't matter if it's, say, coaching a football session, if it's doing a one-to-one at work, a board meeting, whatever it might be. I've always wanted to be seen in the right way and to do the right thing. It probably comes down to what you guys do, right? Personal branding, because I think everything you do as a person is your personal brand.
Yeah, 100%. I get asked that all the time. Like, are there in podcasts and speaking gigs and stuff, like, what is your personal brand? And I always just say it's a reputation. Yeah. And personal branding is the way of shaping that reputation. So I could have a personal brand with my team, with my family, with my whatever, without even posting a single thing on social media. But what personal branding is about shaping and influencing what that looks like, whether it be online or face-to-face or one-on-one or whatever. It's just a fancy name basically for what.
Yeah, and I've never really considered it, but actually probably your personal brand, mine's been built from years ago.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I consciously looked at, but it's been built from years ago. And the way I look at it now is, what would someone say about me when I'm not in the room? Yeah. That's probably my personal brand. Yeah. You'll know more than me about it, but that's kind of how I look at it now. Yeah. So all of the things you do, from your, how you treat people, how you talk to people, how you manage people, how you lead people, how you come across on podcasts or webinars or whatever it might be, that is your personal brand. So yeah.
It's interesting what you're saying there about, like, I know it's nice we segued into personal branding. I really want to dig into that as well, because I think you're a really interesting example of someone who's built kind of quite organically a really strong personal brand in like leadership and stuff. But I want to kind of dig into this whole people pleaser thing, because I think there's a lot of people that will be listening to this thinking, that's me. And I definitely want to get into, a better position in my career, and I want to be in leadership and that kind of stuff. So how did you kind of unlearn caring so much about other people's opinions? Because you and I both know when you're in a position of leadership, you have to make tough decisions. Like, sometimes you have to fire people you care about. Sometimes you have to shut entire, gyms down, maybe, or in your case. Sometimes you have to make decisions that people in the business might not understand, but is in the greater good of the business. So how do you manage making those tough decisions while still kind of battling that inner caring about what people think?
Yeah, I think probably the big word on that's communication. I think I try and communicate. So throughout the pandemic, I did weekly calls with the team. That was just to keep them up to date, even if there's no news, to keep them up to date on anything that was coming up. So I think communication is a big one for that, because if you feel you're giving the right communication out to people, then actually you'll worry less about how you're doing it, because you are communicating good or bad news. You know, I think people appreciate the honesty from that perspective. It is a tough one to really, I think it comes with experience. You know, I've been through more situations now at 43 than I had at 33. So you learn through experience as well. And reading, education. So, you know, I think it's great to train your brain. So, you know, I've seen a psychotherapist for a few years just to talk, and we talk mainly about business. We really do talk about business. So understanding your brain and how it works, and why you think how you think, and why you do what you do, really unravels it and really helps. Reading, I'm reading The Chimp Paradox at the moment, which I think
That's a great book.
It's brilliant. And
I actually think it's one of the best books I've ever written.
100%.
I've read it a few times for that reason.
And it kind of connects things together.
Oh, 100%. It makes you go, okay, I can now understand how my brain and reaction and all that kind of stuff works.
Absolutely. And I think the more education that's there, the more there's there to read and to listen to. So I'm listening to Masters of Scale at the moment from one of the, I think it's a co-founder of LinkedIn. And you listen to people like Mark Zuckerberg on there and John Foley from Peloton. They're just normal people. Like, you know, you listen to them and you think, you know what, they're worth billions, but actually they're human. And they talk about, you know, their challenges and what they've done wrong, and you realise actually, do you know what, everyone's the same, right? Everyone's the same from that perspective. When you're leading a business, you have the same worries or the same thoughts. So I think you can just do the best you can do. Make sure communication to your teams is you know, they're all aware of what's going on, because then you'll worry less about, you know, perception and what's going on in their minds. And then obviously learn. You know, I think, you know, learn from other people's experiences.
I love that. So obviously you went from being a PT, and I know we've kind of kicked off the whole podcast and talking about that, and then gone on to be the CEO of this business. And I appreciate there's a gap between those two things, but I imagine the skill set required to do PT sessions, run a gym, run a region, etc. has been quite different to CEO.
Yeah.
So what's that been like, trying to transition over the years? And back kind of, we circle back a little bit into personal brand, is that, you know, your, as you said, kind of your reputation will have changed throughout those years as well. Yeah,
I mean, the difference in my role now is dealing with scale. Yeah. Now, we're not a huge business. We have 250 employees, 200 personal trainers, 300-400 instructors. We're not a huge business. But dealing with scale is one of the biggest challenges, for sure, because we have a vision, we have a mission as a business, we have brand values as a business, and I think from that perspective, we didn't have a mission, and vision and brand values until about 3 years ago.
What made you get them in?
Scale, growing, and it was easy before. When I started in the business, we had 30 employees. You know, it was small. I was in the clubs every single day, so the culture was driven from just being in the club. You know, talking to the team, spending time with the team, you know, a very personal approach. When you scale, you don't have time to do that constantly. So now I look after property. We're looking at international expansion. You know, I look after, obviously, HODs. I still do all the one-to-ones for all the general managers in the business. So to deal with that, it's a different skill set. First of all, you have to trust. You have to trust the team to be able to get on and do their job, and that's recruiting the right people, for sure. And I know we've spoken before on Clubhouse about culture fit.
I know, I wanted to get on to, like, when we start talking about personal brand, I want to talk about that actually, because I think like that's how we met, was on Clubhouse. And that, I think in itself is such a good example of why leaders should put themselves out there, because it's not just, obviously we're talking about a podcast here, but the kind of people that you can meet and opportunities that you come and all the things that come from putting yourself out there. Like, it's changed my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I still now, you know, I don't mind admitting it. If I'm doing something, I'll prepare for it. You know, so I didn't just turn up here today. just to talk to you on a podcast. We had a brief idea, you know, well, you might talk to me, but a plan, and I make sure that I'm ready for something. Now, some people do that. I mean, I write everything down. If I'm in a meeting, I write everything down. In fact, I was on the jury for a case, and I sat there listening to this case. It was a week long, and I wrote about 20 pages full of notes because I was like, this is somebody's life here, right?
Yeah.
I looked at the guy next to me, and he was drawing sketches of people. Right. So, but I'm one of those people, like, you know, I wanna listen, I wanna learn, I wanna make sure I do things right. So, sorry, tying that back in to the CEO role, and you know, we talk about culture fit and culture add, and I know I mentioned on the Clubhouse, you know, culture fit for me is really important. It really is. But culture add will always be there. You know, if I recruit somebody, I always want to add something to the business. But also, one of our brand values is don't be a dick. I don't want dicks in the business, right? So
no dickheads, no passengers.
100%. You know, and I think, you know, to get a balance between someone that's going to add value to your business for sure, but someone that's going to fit into your business, I also think is really important. Now, our business is very different to, say, a Google or even your business. You know, have a brilliant front of house team, have a brilliant sales team in clubs, I have a studio manager and a general manager, and then we have our head office roles. But ultimately, if I'm recruiting someone that's going to work on our front of house, they have to get along. You know, it's not like someone can add to the culture there and be completely different and, you know, make it tough for everyone else. They have to get along. They're with each other for 8-9 hours a day. Same as a sales office. When you're in a sales office, you want people, of course, I want a sales animal, absolutely. But I'd rather take somebody that isn't quite a sales animal, that's not a dick, than a sales animal that's a dick, because they're going to cause problems in that office, and suddenly your whole sales will go backwards because one person's infecting everyone. So that's really important. So recruiting the right teams is super important. And fortunately for me, I've got an unbelievable team that I can trust to get them to do what they do. And then for me, my role is probably touch time with people. So I try and get as much touch time as I can. So as I said, 10 years ago, it would be in a club every day, 3, 4, 5 clubs. You can do that. At 10 clubs, it's more difficult, especially when you're looking at growth. As I said earlier, on international expansion, spending time abroad, it's very difficult, but I try and get in clubs as often as possible because I know that actually the teams do want touch time with me. Actually having a coffee with them and seeing how they are, you know, I see it as talking more about them personally. How are they? How's their family? How's the children? What are they up to? You know, my other team members, the commercial director, I've got a group operations director, they can get into a bit more of the detail with them on those specifics. But I try and make sure teams are looked after from that perspective.
You said something really interesting there, which is like the culture add, culture fit thing, which like is a whole, I mean, you could do a whole podcast on that in itself. But how do you manage the kind of making sure that people aren't a dick and they do get on with everyone while still maintaining diversity and inclusion, and more importantly, above all, I think diversity of thought as well, because like for us as a business, I want people to come in and yes, get along with the team, and yes, and we're very eclectic in terms of personalities. We have very different views on things in the team, but we all mutually respect each other. But everyone adds something to the business that, you know, otherwise wasn't there. So how have you managed that through the hiring, but also like promoting and even firing?
Yeah, I think it's important. The bit you mentioned there is that you all get on together. I think that's the important thing. You can be different. You know, my group of friends from being involved in football are very, very different. You know, it's people from all different backgrounds. So, but when you come together as a team, you know, you're a team ultimately. So that's the way I look at things. And I think probably the best examples of that are high performers. You know, every single month, every single GM will come in with a team analysis, and that team analysis is someone's performance versus how they represent the brand. So there's 4 boxes on that team performance. So if you're a high performer and you are represent a brand well, then you're put in the promote box. Okay. If you are a high performer and don't present the brand well, it's a case of, we call it a bit of a whipping box. Like, why aren't your brand values there? If you're high performer, why aren't your brand values there? Do we need to do more training with you? Do we need to sit you down and see if everything's okay? Why are you acting up? Why are you causing a problem? If your brand values are low and your performance is low, obviously there's a challenge there, and we need to address that challenge because you're not performing and your brand values are low. So can we fix the brand part first, which improves performance, or can we not do that? And then you've got the last box, which is brand values where are we? Brand values high, performance low. And that is a training issue, right? If someone loves the brand but they're not getting the performance, it's like, okay, what can we do? We love everything about you.
Maybe they're in the wrong role.
Or maybe they're in the wrong role. Absolutely, yeah. So, but what it does for us is every single month I get to see every single team member on a chart based upon their GM's perception. And we can then work with people. So again, it's not a case of going, well, they're in the bottom left, need to fire them. In this case, they're in the bottom left. Why are they in the bottom left? Did they have a poor induction? Okay, what are you doing differently as a GM to improve their performance or their brand perception of the brand? What is it that's caused that in the first place? We dig into all of that first before we make any decisions. I think firing from people from a business, I don't think I've ever fired someone from a business that hasn't shook my hand and said it's the right thing, if I'm being honest.
I love that you've just said that, because I think, again, this is just from my experience, but I actually think if it's not right for you as an employer, it's also not right for the candidate or employee. It's just that one of you got there first.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone that's ever been fired who was shocked.
100% agree. It's for, there's the gross misconduct stuff, which is just
very different.
Separate. It's very, very different. And, even those times there, you kind of look at someone and you go, oh, come on. And they go, oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you're still friends with them 10 years later. It's different. It's not personal. The business stuff, if it's not working for somebody, let's just say it's a sales role, okay, and they're not performing. I say to my HR and training team, it's our responsibility to make this work. We recruit this person, right? You don't just give up on someone, so we need to make this work. But sometimes it doesn't work. And I think after 1, 2, 3 months, that person knows themselves. They just go, do you know what? I thought I'd like sales, but it's just not me. I don't like asking someone if they want to join, or I just don't feel comfortable doing it. In which case, there's other options in the business. We don't just go, okay, we'll part ways. Well, how about front of house? How about you learn the brand in a bit more detail, understand the brand first? As the fitness route you want to go down, we put all of our staff through fitness training if they want. So there's other routes first, and obviously, after that, it's usually a resignation rather than a firing, because people go, actually, it's not right for me either. I think there's very few cases where you have to go into a room and go, you have to leave. It doesn't really work like that if you do the other bits right.
Yeah, I think that's bang on. So obviously you're the CEO of someone else's business right now, which you were basically headhunted out of your own business to do. What's that been like? Because obviously running my business is the main reason I'm doing this is because I'm 100% unemployable, and the thought of working for someone else literally makes my skin crawl. And I would be fired probably, because I'm just one of those people that you tell me what to do and I go, no, fuck that, I'm going to go my own way. Which is why I've always been problematic as an employee.
Yeah.
How have you found that?
I think if you're a crowd pleaser, it's easy. It's. Do you know what? I was speaking to a friend the other day, because I have had my own business, and I also started to talk later on about a business, another business that I started that I was offered investment for, but only if I left GymBox.
Right.
And that would have been starting my own business, and I didn't do it, and there's reasons for that, and probably regrets there as well. But because I'm so, put it this way, the feeling of losing for me lasts for days or weeks. The feeling of winning lasts for minutes. Right. Now that's quite sad. I'm told that's quite a sad feeling, right? Because, well, if you've won, you should. But actually,
I think a lot of people I can relate to that.
Yeah, it's that you get the high, no matter what it is. It could be work, it could be sport, it could be whatever. So I get that initial real buzz about, okay, great, we've really achieved. That's great. Could be a transaction. We sold a big chunk of equity in the business in 2016. It felt great. I stood in the lawyer's office on my own, overlooking London, big window, thinking, do you know what? It was worth it.
Yeah.
I walked out the office. Next day, I'm like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
I'm like, what's next? So
I think that's an entrepreneur's disease, though.
Yeah.
Because I have that. We will for example, we were over target last year in our first year of business by a significant amount of money, and I never thought we would. I just started Klowt to pay my bills, right? I never thought that this would be a thing, and it was very much a case of look how well we did, and everyone was like, this is awesome, and I was like, right, what's next? Yeah. And I think it is a disease, because like you've said, that is very sad that you don't take time to celebrate the stuff you've done well, but you will, I certainly feel, sometimes wallow in the stuff that went wrong and almost overanalyze it to a point where it's no longer productive. Yeah,
100%. I've got way better at it. Don't be wrong. I think 10 years ago I would have really self-analysed the performance or whatever it might be. I've got better at it. I still do it. I still hate losing. I'm a bad loser. At anything, I'm a bad loser. But I think you have to get perspective on it. You have to look at the reasons why. Everything's fixable. So you can look at the reasons why and go, okay, what can we do differently to improve that? But the feeling of winning, as I say, it is strange. I mean, maybe you'll know better than me on this. Is it entrepreneur? So you've got entrepreneur and entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a mix of both, right? I've had my own business. I've had a business that I launched. I spent a fair bit of money on that I then just canned because I was like, actually, you know what? GymBox is my focus.
Yeah.
But probably working from someone else. So Richard, the founder of GymBox, great guy. He's still non-exec now. We're probably more friends than anything now, like because we go to football together, we socialise together. I've known him for 12 years. He's a brilliant advertising man, okay? But he's also great in knowing his strengths and his weaknesses. So when Richard brought me in, he said, actually, do you know what? You're better at sales. You're better at people. You're better at getting a result out of people. So come on board. I kind of just grabbed the role of CEO, for being honest, because I started as sales director and I looked after marketing as well. He looked after the creative, him and David looked after the creative side of marketing. I looked after the operational side of marketing. So they looked after, the look, the feel. I looked after how do we get it out there. Execution, absolutely. I then was in clubs every day. So I was like, okay, this isn't quite right, or that's not quite right, or why aren't we doing this? So I picked up operations. So suddenly I was doing sales, execution and operations. When it came for time for Richard to look at an exit, he just said to me, like, you're a natural progression, you're doing everything. You just grabbed, you didn't talk about it, you didn't ask for a pay rise, you just did it. So when it came to him looking at success, he was like, well, he's already doing the role really. The bit that he doesn't know at the moment is property, doesn't know leasing, So in 2014 I took the role as MD, been in business for 4 years at that stage. And then for the next 2 years I learned everything that I didn't already know. So I spent time looking at new sites. I spent time looking at financing, raising money, all of these things that you need to know in the business, but you have to learn somewhere. Spent 2 years doing that. We made a transaction in 2016 and then I took the role as CEO. So I'd already kind of been doing it.
Like CEO in training.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I think that's great because, when I exit the business, there'll be someone probably that I'll be looking to...
Grooming, yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. That's amazing. I want to kind of pick holes a little bit in your kind of sales and marketing background, because obviously this is branded by Amelia Sordell, and we love talking about branding and marketing on this podcast. I think it's quite unusual for a CEO to be so heavily interested and involved and experienced in sales and marketing. Obviously every CEO wants revenue because obviously, but in my experience not many CEOs get marketing.
Right.
How do you think that's benefited the business? And moreover, like, why do you think that's important that CEOs do get that?
Yeah, so if I look at it, marketing is promoting your product or service. Okay, branding is, what do people say about it? The logo, the look, the feel, the customer service, the uniform, the brand values. That is your business, So anybody that's got a business that is, product or service led, that doesn't focus on branding, for me, would be a concern. It really would. I take a natural interest in it, for sure. But GymBox was created around a stir on marketing and brand.
I mean, the brand is phenomenal. If you haven't seen GymBox's brand, you have to check. The yellow and black is so synonymous with you guys, and every time I walk past Westfield or one of your sites, it's just
it's funny.
You don't even have to see the logo; you just know it's a GymBox gym.
And I think that to me is branding, right?
Yeah.
Because you see all these adverts and you say, okay,
and you think it's a cool the perception is it's cool. Everyone in there's gorgeous and fit and young and successful and all it's like Equinox but on steroids.
Yes.
I think the brand that you guys have built has been awesome.
It's funny because we never set out to be that.
Yeah.
So GymBox was
often
built.
the best brands don't though.
100%.
Look at Gymshark.
Yes, absolutely.
They never set out to be the $1 billion gym brand. They set out to just make t-shirts for bodybuilders that didn't rip.
100%. And I think GymBox set out our tagline is anything goes. So super inclusive brand. And if you look at you read our kind of mantra, it's all about, doesn't matter who you are, what background you're from, come in, get it done, fit in. Now, naturally, when you create a brand, you attract a certain type of demographic. Now, ours is 18 to 40, average age is 32, and people that are in shape generally. Now, we didn't want to be that, and I don't even want to be that, to be honest, because it's great not to be a generalist and to be have a specific, but we don't set out, we want to be inclusive.
Yeah.
In fact, we had somebody come into our gyms. I was in our gym in Bank a few years ago, and somebody came in to do a tour, and they did the tour of the sales team, and they came upstairs and said, do you know what, I really want to join, but I'm going to join Fitness First, get in better shape, then come back and join you. Which was horrendous for me, because that's not what we're about. I was in Farringdon last week and I saw this guy who was upside down on the frame, calisthenics. He's 78 years old, and he was upside down on the frame. And I'm actually going to use that now as part of a feature for us, because our ethos is being inclusive, no matter what background you are. But I think you create a brand by, your customers coming in. If you've got 30,000-40,000 members, and you do create a brand where people go, that's cool, and maybe it's a bit young, and you don't attract the other demographics. So not what we set out to be, but what we are. The logo perspective, interestingly, the logo came from a football club colours, so it's Watford.
That's where I live.
So that's where it came from initially, and actually the founder's a massive Watford fan. So when people say, oh, the logo, it's great, like, where did the inspiration come from? It's like, well, it's my football team's colours, and it just worked. But yeah, back to your point on the marketing, I take a natural interest in it for sure. I learned very quickly with GymBox when I came on board. I was a fan, as I say, so I loved the brand already. Richard had a huge involvement in the brand, so he's involved in every marketing pitch. We didn't recruit a marketing director until 2018.
Wow.
So we never had a marketing director in the business. It had Richard, David and myself. That's all it had.
Busy.
Yeah, so we put the marketing director role in 2018. We bought a chap called Rory, and who's just left to go travelling, actually, been with us for 3.5 years. And the idea of that was to grow up a little bit. So the idea of that was, back in the day when we used to do marketing, it was billboards, it was bus stops, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no social media.
Yeah.
The world's different now.
Top down.
Absolutely, yeah. It was out of home. Now it's very different. So we brought Rory on because he had a good background from Paddy Power and Everyman Cinemas.
Brand, by the way.
Absolutely, yes.
Paddy Power's one of my favourites, along with Pornhub, which I probably shouldn't admit, but I just think their brand and the way they market that brand is amazing.
100%.
I mean, like the way that they've got around the fact that they can't advertise pornography is just so smart.
Absolutely, yeah, completely. And I think, so we recruited our first marketing director, and that was to make us kind of grow up in terms of how we got our message out there. So way more digital now than what it would have been just out of home. But I think from understanding the brand, it takes time. So when Rory first started with us, probably took 6 months to really understand the brand. Now, if Rory is sat here with you now talking about the brand, he'd talk about the brand the same way I talk about it. And I talk about it the same way Richard talks about it, because we've all got the same shared vision. So someone has to sign off the work, ultimately. We spend a good amount of money every year on marketing and the branding. And that just sits with me. So, if it's great, brilliant, and if it's not, then it's probably my fault. But Rory came and did a brilliant job. He did, I could say probably now 99 times out of 100 when Rory runs work by me, it's spot on, because he just gets it. He just gets the brand, and it takes time to learn that.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about culture fit.
Yeah.
And the fact that you were a fan of the brand before you joined, I guess if people are a fan of the brand before they join the business, that makes such a big impact on their success as an employee. Yeah,
absolutely. And I met Rory, I met him over a couple of beers. He was going to do a workout at Fitness First at the time, and I said, do you want a beer? And he said, I've got a workout in a minute. I said, you sure? I'm going to have one. He's like, yeah, all right then.
Peer pressure into drinking before he's going to go lift like 20 kilos.
Exactly, a couple of beers, and then he's got the job. But I just knew it was right. The brands he'd worked for were right for me. I love Paddy Power, Everyman Cinemas, Papa John's, Pizza Express. He'd worked for the right brands, but I knew that he fitted. He's very charismatic, fun guy. Doing great for his CV here, by the way, because he's not got a job at the moment. He's travelling. So
any employers who are looking for a marketing director, there's a man called Rory who's currently in the middle of Thailand who might be looking for a job.
Absolutely, yeah. But no, he just worked. And I said about culture fit, but he also had culture add, because he came and gave us an experience we didn't have. So we get the branding, but the execution needed to evolve, and he did that for us. So yeah, I'll never, as long as I'm in the business, I'll never leave that kind of marketing and branding side of things.
Which leads me on really nicely to personal branding. which is how we met.
Yes.
Because we were on Clubhouse on I can't even remember what we were talking about. Was it marketing? No, LinkedIn.
I can't remember actually. I think it was marketing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the middle of like the first lockdown when everyone went mental on Clubhouse because we had no other adults to speak to and our children and our partners were driving us insane. And so we all piled onto Clubhouse and we were doing a talk about something, and that's how we connected, and then we've connected on LinkedIn since and kind of had a few interactions, which has led me to you to be on this podcast. Thank you very much for joining. Why is it so important for people, yes, great, but leaders specifically, to build their personal brands?
It's really interesting, this one, because I've never thought about personal brand really until I did the Clubhouse with you. And that sounds strange, but I've never really thought about it because I just do what I do.
Even though you were doing it.
I just do what I do.
Yeah.
I just do what I do. And, you know, in terms of GymBox is the brand. I'm not the brand. And there's lots of people that have different opinions on that in terms of leaders, you know, being the face of the brand. You know, there's examples out there of others that do that and do that very well, especially from a founder perspective. So Ben from Gymshark, you know, he's very, very active on LinkedIn. He's got a huge following because of who he is and where he started. He's got a great story. There's probably numerous examples of that. But for me, it's always been about GymBox. It's about the business, not about me. Obviously, you know, you organically build a personal brand because people can see my LinkedIn, they can see my CV, they can see what I've done and where I've gone to, and naturally that creates more interest. So I'm asked to do things like Sky News, I'm asked to do Joe Media and Russian Times, and so then again, and then naturally build your personal brand. Not me actively going, do you know what? If I do that, it builds my personal brand. It just naturally builds your personal brand. So it wasn't until I spoke to you on Clubhouse that I thought about personal brand. The challenge for me really is, from a personal brand perspective, is LinkedIn is basically, it's great, and do you know what? I contact people through LinkedIn when I'm looking at partnerships and everything else, but also I get pitched at 100 times a day. So when you're looking at a personal
because
brand,
you're the CEO of a well-known brand.
Yeah, and I don't like to not answer people. So at the moment I've got about 1,000 requests, follow requests that I haven't accepted, because I know as soon as I accept them, it's going to be a business pitch. And I don't like to not get back to someone, because I've been there. You know, I started a business and had to pitch to people, but I don't want to be doing that. So I'm very selective at the moment about who I add on there, because, you know, if I can see a partnership opportunity and someone adds me, I'm like, great, love that brand, that works. So I could do way more with the personal brand side, but the problem is that then affects my ability to get back to people. I always accept members on there. I get a lot of information from members on our clubs. So again, that's brilliant, because I'll answer within, you know, latest a day. When they might not get an answer quick enough in club, I'll come to me and I'll do that. So again, it all helps. But yeah, the personal brand's never been something that I've really focused on. It's just kind of organically grown.
Why do you think that you building a personal brand takes away from GymBox brand?
I don't know if it takes away, but I've always, the brand is way bigger than me. You know, I didn't create the brand. The brand is huge. It's a phenomenal brand.
I actually think it's so, like, and don't take this the wrong way, I think it punches above its weight in terms of how big you are as a business. I think the GymBox brand, you think that there is 2,000 sites and
100%.
You know, probably, you know, 10,000 employees and all the things, because you are such a big brand, which is a great thing.
100% agree with you. I mean, it's words we use actually. We punch above our weight.
Yeah.
You know, we're very disruptive. We punch above our weight. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to it really. It's just something that for me, you know, I've organically just done these things, been asked to do them. I've never put myself out there to go and do it. So anything that I've been asked to do, you know, I've gone, actually, do you know what? I'll do that. That's great. You know, if it fits for what I want to do.
Yeah.
This today, for example, I'm a big fan of your work and your business, and it's great to have a conversation. And I find it interesting, and I'm learning about personal brand as well. So again, I said earlier, I like learning. So learning about personal brand is important for me. But I'm not at that stage yet where I feel, you know, actually, do you know what? I need to get more on LinkedIn, and I need to do more of this and more of that, because it's really important for me to keep building this personal brand. I'll get there, I'm sure, but at the moment for me it's about the business and not about me.
Do you think that comes back to people's opinions?
It might do, yeah. I mean, you know,
like to the point you were saying, I don't want to accept all these people because if they message me and I don't get back to them, they're going to feel a certain way about that lack of response.
I mean, I think that's just a common courtesy as well. Like, if you're going to accept someone and they're going to message you, I feel it's the right thing to do to message them back. Now, I know plenty of people in business say, I get messages all the time, and I never answer them.
Yeah, so my PA does my stuff because, to your point, I have 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. I literally get about 2,000 messages a week. Like it's a sick joke how many messages I get, and a lot of them are pitching stuff, and they're not super interesting. So the way that we manage it is Amy goes, "Hi, so and so. This is Amelia's PA, Amy. We're really sorry. Like she hasn't been able to get back to you personally. Like the volume is ridiculous. We're not interested right now, but we'd love to stay connected just in case like something might happen in the future." And people are really receptive to that because they appreciate that, you know, running a business is a bit wild, but also they appreciate the response. There are people that will DM you stuff that is completely irrelevant, in which case we go no thanks and just remove them as a connection. But the kind of way that I've got around, I guess, trying to balance having good manners, which I think it's important that you do get back to people, because to your point about, you know, you've been there, I've been there, and sending DMs to leaders of businesses that I wanted to speak to and wanted some advice from, whatever, and just never got a reply for them. And it's not that, you know, I feel some type of way they didn't reply to me, but it always leaves a sour taste 100%. In your mouth about them and the business. So there has been instances then those same people have come back to me and gone, "I've seen what you're doing on LinkedIn, we loved it." And I'm like not really sure we have the same values. But you've got to your point, scale. Like you can't scale your brand and your social media, etc., whilst also getting back to everyone personally. So yeah, I think it's a difficult thing of like kind of figure out what is the purpose of this, why am I doing this, and more often than not that would be more important than whether or not you get back to someone.
And I think this is the thing with the personal brand for me, is that it's just ticked along, as I said, grown organically, and actually probably it's not a priority for me right now to be building that. Maybe that's just what it is. Maybe we could share your PA. I don't have a PA, so maybe we could share your PA, but
I call her PA. She should be CEO because she literally runs my life. I'm like a flapping like pigeon most days, and if it wasn't for Amy, nothing would get done. So
I did have a PA or an EA actually. Beth, she's brilliant. She left the business. She moved back to Wales. She was phenomenal.
Like the boss.
But she used to be like, "Can you just give me work to do, please?" And I was just like, sorry.
I had a call with her in my diary. She put a call in my diary yesterday being like, "Amelia and Amy need to catch up." And I was like, "Fuck, what have I done?" I've done something really bad here. She was like, "Just wanted to flag that like you need to delegate more stuff."
Exactly. Like, I mean, I'd have a meeting in the office and I'd be making a coffee for the person that's come in, because naturally what I do. And she's like, "Can you just let me make the coffee?" And I'm like, "Oh sorry." So I wasn't given enough to do, I don't think. And then she went on to be a GM for us. Actually, she loved the business, and then she moved back to Wales. But to your point on the personal brand side, I did hear it was a slightly different, but there was a study done, and I'm always conscious of this. I think it was Virgin Media. Virgin Media did a study around the amount of people that their customers that applied for jobs and had a bad candidate experience.
I know exactly which study you're talking about.
Yeah, and I say this to my teams. So when we look at recruitment in our business now, we're really hot on recruitment. So we're really hot on, we use a system called Harry. Everything comes in, everything's answered. If it's a yes or a no, you'll get a response, 100%. And I treat my own personal brand like that, to be honest, because I don't want to be, that could be someone's business, but they could be a member. And if I don't respond to them, that looks really poor. And therefore, what happens from the membership's perspective? So the Virgin Media one was, I think it cost them £5 million a year. Cancelled subscriptions for people that had poor candidate experience, which is just phenomenal. So we made sure, after reading that, I was like, right, talent team, we need to make sure this is bang on. Anyone that comes in, they get a great candidate experience. It's really important. So, I think it's just priorities. I think that's the thing for me. If I had more time, I would do it. If I had a EA, PA, I probably would do it, if I'm being honest, because it's great to build your own
But
brand
you had it
long
recently,
term.
so it hasn't been, I appreciate we're very different levels in terms of like my little agency and running your business, but yeah.
Well, no, but you'll get a couple of thousand messages a day or a week, whatever,
It's wild.
Absolutely. And
this is it. Inappropriate ones too.
Really, LinkedIn.
It's an interesting platform. But to your point about, candidate experiences, I love that you brought that up, because I think there was a study, I don't know if it was Virgin Media, it was a different company, I think, that did the study around candidate kind of research and stuff. 60% of candidates want or prefer thought leadership as their preferred research style of content to figure out whether they want to work for a company.
Yeah.
So like personal branding is really important for leaders, because it's what is going to make that initial decision for someone to be like, yes, I do want to apply for that organisation. And to go back to like what you full circle to what you said when we first had this conversation, which was I was a fan of the brand when I first joined. Like if someone's a fan of you, because people don't really join businesses, they join leaders, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
If you're a great leader in an okay business, you will attract great talent. Yeah. but why not do that at scale? Like, and that's how I kind of see personal branding is not necessarily sort of this is all about me. It's actually benefiting directly my business, because I know I get 10x the reach of my company brand, but equally, you know, Megan's a really good example. One of our copywriters, I DM'd her in a headhunt saying like, I can see you're currently working, but we really need a copywriter. And she went, is that the Amelia Sordell? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, oh my God, yeah, I really want to speak to you. I've been following you for a year and a half. And it was like,
yeah, absolutely.
Almost instantly, she was qualified herself into our culture fit, how we did things, our values, all the stuff, because she'd been following me for so long. So like, in terms of, has that helped your hiring process at all? Has anyone come across your content and gone, that's the kind of leader I want to work with?
I do get quite a bit of that. And to be fair, I do answer those ones. If it's a direct message, I get, you know, I saw Sky News or Joe Media, and I really like the fact that you're sticking up for the industry and you're trying. You know, and that wasn't a PR thing. I generally felt pubs and bars and restaurants opening before gyms was just ridiculous, and I was like, I'm opening until the threat of imprisonment came in, and I was like, actually, do you know what? Maybe
it was big balls until they came. Like, the police officers started knocking on the door,
and then I did say, do you know what? If I go to prison for this, would that be good PR or not? I'm not sure, but
it probably would be actually.
Yeah, well,
you'd rebrand to like Dog Pound or something.
Yes, well, when they threatened fines and things for members of being on site, I thought I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But those sorts of things, and that's just me standing for what I believe in. That isn't, you know. But again, it all builds personal brand. I get that, but it's just me just being me and just standing for what I believe in.
Yeah, it's just you at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So I take your point on that though. You're right, because if you've got 80,000 followers and you're looking to recruit, you know, 100% that helps. I think Ben from Gymshark has done a brilliant job of that. If you think about his content and what he's putting out there and his journey, I mean, that anyone wouldn't work for Ben. I work for Ben.
That's I know, me too. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. They 100% done that as a recruiting exercise for sure, because they're in Birmingham, right? So it's not to say that the Birmingham talent pool is small, but it's smaller than a Manchester or a Leeds or a London, because that's where people who are in marketing and the digital roles, which basically Gymshark's a tech business at this point. It's not really kind of an e-commerce business. They're just a tech business that happen to sell great product. They're going to struggle to find talent. So I think what they've done there is really smart in that pushing that kind of thought leadership out on Ben's behalf in order to attract great talent. And actually that culture of personal branding, if you look throughout the entire business, you have interns going viral, you have the head of social going viral, Noel Mack, who's the chief brand officer, you have like every single person in that business is invested in building out their personal brands, which in turn plays into the company. And I actually think probably has had a really significant role in growing Gymshark to be the brand that we all love.
Do you think on personal branding though, I mean, Ben comes across really well, and I think the benefit of Ben is that he's very humble.
Yeah.
Right, he's very humble. He comes across as someone that's always learning, which I think, you know, you or I probably are as well, right? You know, it's you've got
I don't know, I think I come across sometimes a bit aggressive, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, because I feel passionately about stuff, and sometimes that comes across as being aggressive.
I don't think you do. I mean, I personally wouldn't be sat here if I'd gone on LinkedIn and thought dick. Like, I just wouldn't be.
You know, I'm definitely not a dick. Hopefully.
But when
she's laughing too much.
But when you look at some LinkedIn content about personal brand, there's some people out there that have built a personal brand that I go, you're a dick. Yeah. So I think there's a fine line, isn't there? And I think
there is.
If your stories,
particularly on LinkedIn,
yeah, absolutely. There's people that have comments or a negative or just for the sake of it, and these people in that are in, you know, high-profile roles as well. So their personal brand to me isn't attractive.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to have the right, you've got to be the right person to be able to build your positive personal brand anyway.
I think there's kind of a couple of sides to this coin. I think so. I have a rule that I will champion stuff, and I'll call bullshit out where I see it. But I'll never be negative. So I might be like, this is ridiculous, but I would never be like, this is ridiculous because that person's a prick. Like, it's just not my personality. Yeah. Which leads me on to the amazing thing about your personality is it repels who you want to repel and attracts who you want to attract. So you're going to look at someone and say, oh, they're a bit of a dick, so I don't really want to be involved with them. But you might not be the person that they're trying to attract. They might be trying to attract, you know, egomaniacs, because that's who they're interested in attracting. And equally for you, they might look at your my stuff and go, oh, what the hell is she talking about? I don't want to follow her. And that's great because it's kind of repelled people I don't want in my network or in my whatever. So I guess personal branding, it's just your personality at scale, which in many ways is a really, really good thing. That's how I've managed to hire all these lot. So
yeah, absolutely. No, agreed. I mean, like you say, if you've got 80,000 followers and you're headhunting someone, they're like, oh great, I know who you are.
Makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely makes it a lot easier.
It's definitely made it a lot easier. It's also saved me a lot of money on recruitment fees.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
which is significant. I want to kind of like get a couple more questions in if we can around the things that you said earlier in the podcast before we close everything off. You said earlier, and I think this is something that is really interesting and I'd love to pick a hole in, is that stress is good.
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
I think it gets you in the right mindset for high performance.
Why do you think?
Look, if I rocked up to work and...
Before you answer, sorry to interrupt, the reason why I want to pick a hole in this is I think we are told, don't work too hard, don't be too stressed. Stress is really bad for you. Get that, all the sleep that you can, and you have to be doing this every day, and don't go work past 6:30 because that's going to be really bad for you.
Yeah. My advice on this is do what works for you, right? There's so many opinions out there. I can go onto LinkedIn now and find 10 different opinions about how we should be working. But do you know what works for me works for me. And because I have high standards of myself, again, be it in anything, I've got a high standard of myself, or set high standards for myself, that for me gets me in ready preparation for whatever I'm going to do. So if I'm presenting I was in Dubai recently and I presented on a panel. I prepare in advance. I make sure I'm prepped for that. I just sort of rock up there, and I could rock up. I've been 20 years in the industry. I could probably just off the top of my head just talk about things. But for me, that works. Having a bit of nerves or a bit of stress and a bit of preparation on the plane on the way out there, that works for me. If you can rock up to an event like that and have no worries about anything, not wing it, and it works for you, and you don't go afterwards, God, why did I say that? Or, whereas I think if you prepare for that, you're less likely to do it. Yeah. If you prepare for what might be asked and talk about the future of fitness and digital fitness, and I'm knowledgeable about that and I'm prepared for it, then I'm more likely to represent myself better. And that's why I do it. Look, would I prefer not to have any level of stress or anxiety around doing certain things? Maybe, I don't know. Again, there was a study done on this, stress, and a perception of stress causing you, say, a heart attack. And actually, the right level of stress, there was a bit of a placebo effect with it. Now, it surprised me, but to have a level of stress in your body and change your mindset to say, right, this stress isn't going to cause me illness. This stress is going to make me better at what I'm doing. And the people that thought that way were the people that didn't have heart attacks from the level of stress. Now, there's going to be doctors out there that say, that's bollocks, But actually, there was a study that was done. You can find it on the internet. Yeah. And I try to look at things that way. So if I've got any, stress or anxiety around what I'm about to do, I'll take it into a positive and go, I'm doing this because I need to be ready for game. I need to be ready for the game. I need to be ready for what I'm doing.
I also think that you wouldn't get stressed if you didn't care.
Yeah.
And if you care, then you want to do well, and that's why you're stressed. So actually, if you think of it in that context, stress is not a bad thing. It's just an indication that you really want to do well in something.
100%. And it's that container, isn't it? Like a funnel. So much stress is good. Okay, but when that funnel starts to overflow, stress is not good, because then that's burnout, right? So then you get to a stage of, it could be your home, it could be the sport, it could be work, it could be whatever it might be. You've got to control the stress levels, of course. I'm not saying about be stress for everything, because that's not good for anyone.
I don't know. In lockdown, I felt stressed every day. It's like, I hate my life, I hate my house, I hate my husband, everything.
There is that line, though, isn't there? Once you go over that line, too much stress will cause you damage and cause you poor performance. Whereas I think just the right level is good for everyone.
Yeah, it's just like the right level of alcohol.
Yeah,
it's good for everyone. Just too much is not great.
Not the next day.
It's not good.
Not productive for a week afterwards.
Yeah. So lockdown, I know we've kind of made a couple of jokes about it, but obviously that would have decimated the business for a short period of time anyway. And I know you've spoken about some of the things of you standing up and saying like this is ridiculous and sort of sticking your head above the parapet on behalf of the kind of fitness and hospitality and retail industries, etc. What did that mean for you, GymBox?
Yeah, I mean, we closed early, so 18th of March we closed, 2020. It didn't.
That's 2 days after Send Home Order.
2 days before.
Okay.
So 20th of March was the date, and at that stage there, it was probably the most difficult time of my working career, 100%, because I had to make a decision with my board to say, look, this doesn't feel right. You know, I've got staff with COVID, I've got members with COVID. I didn't know at the time, but I had COVID. It doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel right. I'm going to close the clubs. And that was the decision. The board supported me on that. At that stage there was no such thing as furlough, right? There was nothing. So I'm sending 250 staff.
That was brought in when? May? Something like that?
That was brought in, it was quite soon afterwards actually. It was quite soon afterwards, yeah. But I'm sending 250 staff home, employed staff. I'm sending personal trainers home that are self-employed and instructors are self-employed. And that caused me a hell of a lot of stress because that's people's livelihoods, that's people's income. Now, fortunately for us, I said to the board, I didn't want to make any rash decisions. You know, we didn't go like some businesses, right, okay, we're in a pandemic now, this could be months, let's make those redundancies. It wasn't what we did. And as you said earlier, we punched above our weight. We're not a big business with 600 million in the bank. But my initial thoughts going into that initial kind of close down was I need to protect the teams, you know, as much as I possibly can. So we didn't make any rash decisions. Boris has sent everyone home on the 20th, and then about a week or 2 weeks later, furlough was announced, and actually had a really positive impact on the business. The teams were all like so thankful for not making any rash decisions, and they, you know, I had loads of messages from them saying thank you so much because I had a story of my friend that did X, Y, Z, made redundant. So my biggest concern throughout the whole pandemic, I've got to be honest, was the team, because you know, I'm privileged enough to be in the position I'm in. You know, some of these our team members, they're actresses, actors, models, musicians from Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, all over the country, living in London, high rents, you know, that have got, you know, 80% of the salary now for the foreseeable future. So it caused me a lot of stress. So we tried to do things in lockdown to support sort of mental health. So we did obviously partnerships with platforms, with Headspace. So teams have access to Headspace. We've got a 24-hour support line for any mental health issues as well for our teams.
In-house?
Yes, so it's a number they can call 24/7 to have support with that. There's always going to be things you do better as a leader, right? And coming back from it, I took it quite personally. 99% of the feedback was brilliant, but the 1% of the feedback was, well, why couldn't GymBox just do this? Why can't they top us up? Why can't they do this? And it's like, you know what? I'd love to be able to go through the whole business background and, you know, where we are. But not everything's possible, right? You do the best you can as a leader. So it was a challenging time. But we saw it as an opportunity. What time do you ever get in your business to sit back and look at strategy without being at work with a million other things to do? So we then re-looked at the whole strategy of the business. I sat there in a room for a couple of days, put out my initial thoughts on it in terms of digital fitness. So we launched an online offering within about 3 months. We launched our at-home products. We launched partnerships with, say, WeWork. It just gives me time to actually go, okay, what does this mean? You know, what are all the things that I'd love to be able to do that I haven't had time to do, and do that. So I've seen it as a positive from that perspective, that actually we've grown the business from different areas that we may have not done previously. Coming back from lockdown, our staffing reduced by about 20% organically. So about 20% of our teams didn't come back to London. So
Which, I mean, you'd expect, right? Like,
absolutely.
I certainly found that lockdown, I went into lockdown employed and I came out of it having quit and started a business. So I think a lot of people had that. Yeah,
I think there was a couple of things. One was, you know, the theatres hadn't opened in London, and therefore if you're acting, why are you going to come back from Leeds to London for no work? It doesn't make sense. So I think some of it was that. Some of it was just a complete mindset change of, do you know what, I've been in London now for 5 years. I've not made it in the acting career. I'm going to change my mindset completely and do something different, and that's fine. So we went for a period of, you know, being about 20% down on our teams, and we left it like that because London was very, very quiet. I mean, you know, yourself coming to London, it was quiet for months.
It's weird.
Fortunately for us, the business has growing again, which is good. It takes a couple of years to recover from this because of the way our membership base works. But it's been super positive, and the teams have been brilliant since coming back, and I think they've all really appreciated that we've done the best we can overall with what was a pretty poor situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty gnarly for a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
You said earlier in this podcast that, you know, you've had years of therapy. Do you think that your experience with mental health has helped kind of impact helping your team with theirs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't want to say years of therapy, it sounds really bad.
I've had years of therapy. Listen, I probably should have more years of therapy. I actually think everyone should have a therapist, and it's basically a spa day for your brain when you see a therapist. Yeah. And actually, I see it as almost like high performance, like coaching.
100%.
Because you can kind of, you were saying, you know, you speak to speak to someone about business, I do the same. I go, this is what's worrying me, this is that, and they kind of help sort of make sense and take this puzzle piece and put it into that one, and you kind of leave feeling a bit more clear.
Absolutely. I think it's, for me, training your brain and understanding your brain is so important. It's so important. Now, I started seeing someone probably 5 years ago, so pre-pandemic. Saw him for a few months, got a really good clear picture, understood things, I wanted to understand why I'm me. That was the big thing for me, is, why am I a perfectionist? Why am I this? Why am I that? Once you understand things, you're actually more accepting of it, right? Because I don't want to change being me, because that's who I am, but I understand why I do certain things and why I'm, so on it in terms of standards and all the things that I look at work.
And understanding that probably makes you more self-loving as well, because then you're not questioning all the things and decisions that you make. Yeah,
you question less for sure. And then, let's say, education, reading Chimp Paradox was just like, wow.
I'll send you an article, actually. It's called Into the Monkeyscape, and it's on a forum called Cracked, which I'm obsessed with. And it's a very similar concept in that it talks about, it compares us to chimps and tribes and all those things, but it says that as individuals, we can only consider between 80 and 150 people. So that you would be one of my 150 people. Danielle, who's sitting here, would be one of my 150 people. My kids, my ex-husband, my celebrities, influencers, all these people add up to your 150 people. So that's the reason why when we're putting our rubbish in our bins, we don't carefully box away the glass that we broke and put it in a box just in case it cuts the binman, or tie the bleach on top of the bleach cap to make sure it doesn't blind him when he flings it into the thing, because he's not in, or she's not in, our tribe. So it's kind of reverse engineering the chimp paradox idea a little bit, which is all about your chimp is the one that wants to act out and controlling your chimp, and this is actually saying that yes, we need to consider that, but also consider the impact that our conscious self is having on other people too, and kind of taking a step back from that and realizing that every action you take has an effect on someone.
100%,
and that was mind-blowing to me when I read that.
100%. You should send that to me. That would be good. And I think emotional intelligence is huge, right? So when you ask about teams, I think I've got way more empathy with it, because I know why I am the way I am. So when I have team members that are not performing, it's not about giving them a bollock and why not perform. It's about going, how are you? How's things? It's digging a little bit deeper and having that conversation.
80% of your performance is based on mindset. Right?
100%, 100%. And I think we had a team member leave recently, and I went out for a coffee with them before they left, and they left because they weren't in a good space. And I don't and people are going to know now, right? I don't actively go out at work standing and go, oh, by the way, guys, I see a therapist and it's brilliant. You should all. It's not my way. But what I have done for people that have been willing to share their stories with me is listen and then say, because people that struggle, I find generally feel like they're the only one, right? And I know they're not, and I think they know they're not, but they feel it's very. So when I say to them, look, to be honest with you, and give them a bit of my story and go, actually during the lockdown, I found a huge pressure of protecting all of you guys, and actually for that, was my funnel was getting overflowed because I was worried about individual situations and the business and everything else. So I went to speak to someone, and actually, do you know what? It's all right. It's all right to do that. Did that every week for 6 months, and you'll be all right. So my recommendation to that person leaving the business was, look, if you haven't spoken to someone already, please go and do it. Because if you go and do it, you're going to realise actually, it can be solved. It's not as bad as you think. Go reset. Go and take another job that isn't so much pressure. Fantastic, but go and look after your brain as well. So I think it's important.
Because I think it's interesting that I'm about to say this, because obviously you're in the fitness industry, but people take care of their bodies, especially 2022. We're all obsessed with fitness, and I think we've all come out of the pandemic a little bit too heavy and gone, right, I'm going to go and get. I certainly feel that way. But we don't consider our mind in the same way. If you sprain your ankle, you would go and get 100%. Support for that. If you cut yourself, or you bruised yourself, or you broke your arm, you'd go and put that in a cast. Your mind takes just as much of a battering, if not more of a battering, than your body, and yet we don't treat that in the same way.
I did a webinar with WeWork, and I said exactly the same thing. It was, if you want to sort your diet out, you see a nutritionist. If you like you say, if you sprain your ankle, pull a hamstring, you go and see a physio. But you don't think about the mind the same way, because it makes you feel weak by going to do it. And actually, it's the opposite. It's completely the opposite. You will perform better in life after going and speaking to someone, because they're a specialist. They know what they're doing. So I think,
and they're neutral.
And it's just amazing what listening can do. Therapists, they hardly say anything, do they, in an hour? they don't need to, because they just guide you to, you get to your own result at the end of it and go, actually, do you know what? That makes sense. Thanks for that. It's worth the money.
Yeah,
right.
100%. One of the best things I ever started doing was talking to myself. So I like, Danielle just laughed. I walk around the house literally out loud talking to myself. So yesterday was a really good example of this. I had a really shit day, as you know, everyone does. I'm not going to cry about it. It's just one of those things. But I came downstairs and I was like, this has been a really shit day. And I could have sat there and gone, I can't be bothered to do this anymore. Yeah. But then out loud I was like, no, you've got this. You'll be fine. Like, that's not big of a deal. And I kind of caught myself talking to myself, and I was like, this feels really good, but also a bit crazy at the same time. But actually, it's been really, really positive for me. Like, you know, there's been so many things happen in my personal life, you know, the last year, and launching the business and quitting a job and, you know, divorcing my ex-husband and all the emotional kind of turmoil that comes with that. And I genuinely think the one thing that has kept me going, aside from fitness, which I'm now in love with, and, you know, it's my favourite part of my day is when I get to go to the gym and just have an hour of like no one talking to me, no one asking for anything, just smashing out and seeing whether I can do a PB on the sled or something.
Yeah, great. Focus,
Yeah, I love it. But the one thing that's got me through all of that is kind of giving myself therapy, which is, you know, looking in the mirror and thinking, you know, you've had a bit too much to eat the last couple of days, and be like, no, you're fucking hot. Like, you've got this, queen. Like, and just kind of hyping, and not just about physical, about mental. And as I said, a bad day yesterday, being like, no, you've got this. No one died. It's fine. And we all do that in our heads, but I think actually externalizing that has been literally like giving myself therapy, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, and also whatever works for you. Like, if it works for you, I mean, do it. I mean, I listen to...
I dare see what my internal house cameras look like when I walk around the house talking to myself.
Do they record volume? Do they hit this?
Actually they do. I should say, go and dig them out.
But I think whatever works for you, and, you know, I listen to, I kind of do meditation. Like, I use Aura now, the app Aura. Yeah. I use that daily, 10-15 minutes on the train, just because I think it gets me into the right start of a mindset for the day. Now, you know, people will say, well, how do you do it on a train when there's noise? I just do it because it works for me. And even if it's a mindset now of, I do that and I get myself prepped ready for work and I start my emails and everything else, but it's just what I do, and it's become part of a bit of a routine, to be fair. So I
love that. Last couple of questions. What's next for you and GymBox? Because you made like a little comment earlier on that kind of indicated there were things coming.
Yeah, I think for us now, I think what the pandemic's done for me is made me realise I want to accelerate the brand out there quicker. Because the business is this year, or next year is 20 years we've been around for.
Wow.
20 years.
Like, it's so funny actually, because you think of GymBox, you think this like young, fun, cool, like it's not been around that long sort of brand.
Yeah.
And you think the same about Gymshark, they've been around for like what, 8 years, 9 years?
Yes, right, yeah. So I think from that perspective, we're not a new brand, and to stay relevant and always evolve is tough. No, the marketing, if you look at the marketing 19 years ago, it's very different to now. In fact, you couldn't do what we did then now. You just couldn't do it. It's a different world. So we've had to grow up on the marketing side of things and stay disruptive. But I think it's time now to get the brand out there. So what I'm looking at the moment is obviously more growth in London, but international markets is the way I see things going forward. The international markets are crying out for a GymBox. They're not. It's very, very different. London's very competitive. There's some good brands in London, good brands in New York and America in general. But you go into Europe, there's some okay brands, but a GymBox would be brilliant. So you think about cities like Berlin,
and Dubai as well. Wow.
Yeah, Middle East, absolutely. Berlin, Stockholm, Amsterdam. So the plan really now is to kind of rebuild the business as it is now, which is you know, started to move forward, which is great. And then international expansion is where I want to go with the business.
I love that. Oh, I'm excited. You have to let me know when you're opening up in Dubai, and I'll be over there. So the last question, we ask the same question to every single guest that comes on this podcast, and I love doing these podcasts because they're very fluid, and there's not really a script, and we kind of go, we're going to cover these sort of things and just let it kind of naturally go where it's going to go. But this is the one question I script, and it's the one I want everyone to ask is, what are 3 things that today's Marc would go back and tell 21-year-old Marc?
So mine wouldn't be business related, but it would affect business. So my first one would be just always be yourself, because, you know, being a crowd pleaser from a young age through to 43 is tiring.
Yeah, I bet.
It's very tiring. And look, it's got its benefits. It's got its benefits, like I said to you earlier. An entrepreneur, you know, I got to where I've got to from being me. But I would say, you know, be yourself and don't stress about being yourself is probably the main thing. That's the first thing. Second thing would be, it's okay to lose. Like, it's okay to lose sometimes, because win or learn. Previously, as I said earlier, growing up, being younger, getting older, I take losing a little bit better now than I did 10 years ago. But losing, look at the positives that come out of losing and how you can do things differently, I think would be important. And the third one would be, look after yourself. Be kind to your own brain, because the way I say to my teams now, and I've said this, when people have been performing poorly, it's just a fucking job.
Yeah.
Like, it really is now. Like, if it doesn't work out of us, for whatever reason, we'll shake hands, we'll go for a beer. Good luck with what you're going to do next. Stay in touch, but just look after your own brain, because I think there's nothing more important in your own personal health, and that's probably where I would. My younger self, I'd give that advice, because business-wise, it's gone okay for me. So it's more about the personal side of things I'd look after.
Yeah, I mean, you are the most important person in your life, period. You're the only person that'll ever be there.
Absolutely.
Marc, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I could have spoken to you for hours, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.